How great is that song, right? Hamera by our good friend Josh Warshawski from his 2018 album Havarai Nevarech. Friends, let us bless. Amen. Friends, let us bless by lighting up the darkness. Shabbos is almost here. We're so excited. Who is with us on a Friday afternoon show as we're getting ready for Shabbos? Yehudit in Florence, South Carolina, wishing everyone a restful and rejuvenating Shabbos. Gordo checking in from Scotland. Great to have you with us, Gordo. Tom says good Shabbos. Nancy in North Carolina. Guy in Ohio. James in Indianapolis. Karen in Northern California. Nicholas in Portland. Tom is saying to Gordo, okay. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong. A little bit of Scottish there. Aaron, Shabbat Shalom u'mevarach. Michael Badgley, Shabbat Shalom from Indiana. Over there on the YouTube side, Lynn checking in from North Texas. Welcome, everybody. Today's episode of AT Daily is sponsored by Leah Mark, who says, please make the show in memory of Shalom Alter Mark, a Holocaust survivor who respected and cared for every Jew whom he met after the war. Respectfully, Leah. Leah, may Shalom Alter Mark's memory always be for a blessing. May his neshama have a great aliyah in the world of souls. May our learning today accrue to his merit and lift him up even a little bit higher. We say amen, and may you and all your loved ones be showered in blessings. We say amen, and thank you for enabling us to share more Torah with more people around the world. Quick bit of housekeeping. No class tomorrow night, Saturday night, the Motzi Shabbos show. Canceled tomorrow night. We'll make it up with a double daf on Sunday or the next day that makes sense. But the next class will be on Sunday. We don't have a class tomorrow night. Good news, Nina's mom is in town. She's an artist, Judy Henry. You can check out her work. Really beautiful work that she produces. And she's here in LA, and she's got an opening of her art show. So Nina and I are going to attend that and support her mom. And so we'll resume class on Sunday at the regular time. All right, where are we holding? We are in chapter 1 here of Tractate Chagigah. These are the laws of the festival offerings. And yesterday we complete our discussion of Mishnah number 3, so we're opening Mishnah number 4 here in chapter 1 on page 9, 9a near the top. Mishnah 4. With regard to one who did not celebrate by bringing the festival peace offering on the first day of the festival of Sukkos, he may celebrate and bring it during the entire remaining days of the pilgrimage festival, and even on the final day of the festival, i.e. the 8th day of assembly, known as Shmini Atzeres. Okay, so the whole idea here is that the festival peace offering, the obligation is to bring it on the festival day itself, right? The main festival. So as we've said repeatedly, and it's an important distinction to make, that the first day of Sukkot and the first day of Passover, full-fledged festival day, all the restrictions of Shabbos apply on the first day of the festival, except that you can cook on the festival for the needs of the festival. But otherwise, all the restrictions, the prohibitions on work, etc., like Shabbos, apply on the festival, the first festival day. Outside of Israel, the first 2 days of the festival. Then we get into the intermediate days of the festival. So this obligation of this particular offering, the Chagigah, the festival peace offering, it's an obligation to bring it on that first day of the festival. If you don't bring it on the first day of the festival, you can still make a redress. You can make a repair, a fixing of that. you're not bringing the Chagigah on that, for the intermediate days, for that next day of the festival. You're bringing it during the festival to redress the fact that you weren't able to bring it, or you made a mistake, whatever. You didn't bring it on the first day. You can make up for it for the rest of the days of the festival. And the surprise, the chiddush, what's new here that's surprising, is that you can even make up for bringing the Chagigah offering on the first day of Sukkos. You can do it all through the days of Sukkos and even the 8th day of Sukkos. Why is that surprising? Because the 8th day of Sukkos is Shmini Atzeres, and that is its own holiday. It's specified in the written Torah. And we often talk about this is sort of like God's after party, right? For Sukkot, the whole world is invited. And then on the 8th day, it's just like a little after party for the cherished few who are going to enjoy that with God. But it is its own holiday. It doesn't have any particular observances except that we celebrate another day. But the mitzvahs of Sukkot don't apply on Shmini Atzeres. We don't wave the lulav and the 4 species on Shmini Atzeres. We might eat in the sukkah, but we disqualify the sukkah and we don't say a bracha on eating in the sukkah because we're not commanded to eat in the sukkah once it becomes Shmini Atzeres. It's its own holiday. However, we can redress, not that we didn't bring the Chagigah on the first day of Sukkot, we could still do that even on the 8th day. If the pilgrimage festival passed and one did not celebrate by bringing the festival peace offering, so then he is not obligated to pay restitution for it. Even if he consecrated an animal for this purpose and it was lost, once the festival is over, he has no obligation to replace it as he has missed the opportunity for performing this mitzvah. And about this situation it is stated, Ecclesiastes 1:15, that which is crooked cannot be made straight, and that which is wanting cannot be numbered. Right? So you can make up for not bringing the Chagigah on the first day of the festival, for the rest of the festival. But after the festival ends, you can no longer redress that fault. You can't make up for it anymore. If you consecrated an animal to bring as a Chagigah, and then the festival, all the days of the festival pass, and you didn't bring it, so that's still a consecrated animal, and you're supposed to bring it in the temple, but now it serves as a gift offering, no longer as the festival peace offering. That animal that was consecrated, you can't just put it back in your pen and rejoin your flock. It's still a consecrated animal. It has to be given to God. All of this is when the temple is standing, but you can no longer bring the Chagigah. And that's why they apply this line from Ecclesiastes, that which was crooked cannot be made straight. It's too late. Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh says, who is the crooked that cannot be made straight? Right? First, it was applying this verse, that which is crooked cannot be made straight. Like you missed your opportunity to bring that offering. So it's like it's a crooked situation that cannot be made straight. Now, Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh sort of redefines what the line from Ecclesiastes is talking about, this verse, and he asks a different question. He doesn't say, what is it that cannot be made straight? He says, who is it that cannot be made straight? Who is the crooked that cannot be made straight? This verse is referring to one who engaged in intercourse with a woman forbidden to him and fathered a mamzer with her. This individual is unable to rectify his sin because the status of this illegitimate child is permanent. And if you say that it is referring to one who steals or robs, that kind of a crook, well, although he is crooked, he can return what he stole, and in this manner his sin will be rectified. But if you have forbidden relations and it produces a mamzer, so now you brought a child into the world who has tragically, through no fault of the child's own, has this blemished lineage, right? What is a mamzer? Let's define a mamzer. This is a term that sometimes gets used, in a Jewish context, in Jewish movies, sometimes even in a comedic context, like it's just, this unpleasant person. But a mamzer is a very specific thing, and it really is no fault of this child's own. What is a mamzer? A mamzer is a child born from relations between a married woman and a man other than her husband, right? So the man, whether he's married or not, it doesn't matter. But she is a married woman and she has sex with somebody other than her husband, and this produces a child. That child is a mamzer. Or there's another situation that can produce a mamzer, and that is if two relatives who are forbidden to marry by Torah law, where the participants in such a relationship are subject to the punishment of kares, excision, death by the hand of the heavenly court. What are we talking about here? This is incest, right? So there's a number of relationships spelled out in the Torah of people who are prohibited to each other. Like, for example, God forbid, a parent and child can't have sex with each other. Sisters, a brother and sister can't have sex with each other. It's prohibited. If they have that prohibited union and produce a child from it, then that child is a mamzer. It's very, very bad status to have because the mamzer can't marry any other Jew with just very few exceptions. Let's continue. An exception to this principle of people who are prohibited to each other under pain of penalty of kares produces a child, that is a mamzer. There's an exception to that principle, which is the menstruating woman, right? It is prohibited for a husband and wife to have relations with each other, even though they're married, if she is menstruating, and if they do it anyway on purpose, right? So this might lead to kares, right? Not punishment at the hands of any earthly court, but that this will be, badly regarded by the heavenly court and produce some kind of a punishment. But if they have a child, which is a little odd, right? She's menstruating. Why would she get pregnant? But of course, it could happen. The menses can be disrupted in all kinds of ways. So she might be menstruating and get pregnant. But the child of that union is not a mamzer, right? So even though they're not, the husband and wife are not supposed to have sex when she's menstruating, if they do and she gets pregnant, that child is not a mamzer. Okay. Now, the offspring of an unmarried couple, right? If the woman's not married, she's not supposed to have sex with anyone. If they do have sex and she gets pregnant, okay, that's a baby born out of wedlock, but it is not a mamzer. Mamzer is very specific. Married woman gets pregnant by a man other than her husband. Some would say that an unmarried woman who has sex with anyone, like they actually are married. We don't use that definition anymore. But one of the ways to betroth a woman under traditional law is to have sex, right? Like these unmarried people have sex. Technically, they become married at that point. That's a much more complicated area of law that is way beyond the scope of what we're going to be talking about today. But the point is that the child of an unmarried man and unmarried woman is not a mamzer, right? Only the married woman gets pregnant by a man who's not her husband. Okay. The offspring of an unmarried couple is not a mamzer. A mamzer inherits his natural father. So if he's like the only son of the man who fathered him, he does inherit from that man, right? It's not like the mamzer has no status under the Jewish religion. The problem is he can't get married. He inherits his natural father, and he is halakhically considered his father's son in all respects. But a mamzer may marry only a female mamzer or a convert. Likewise, a female mamzer may marry only a male mamzer or a convert. But, like the vast majority of the Jewish people are prohibited to someone whose status is a mamzer under Torah law. So that's why you see this really has nothing to do with the festival peace offerings, except that having brought in this verse, that which is crooked and cannot be made straight, they're going to emphasize, where does that, who is a person who's crooked and not be made straight? It's the man who has sex with this married woman, she gets pregnant, produces a mamzer, that can never be fixed, right? And that child is going to pay the price. As you can see, the Torah looks very unfavorably on adultery. It is one of the cardinal sins. And Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says, one calls crooked only someone who was initially straight and subsequently became crooked. And who is this? This is a Torah scholar who leaves his Torah study. Here is an example of something straight that became crooked, according to Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. That's Mishnah number 4. Now the Gemara. The Mishnah taught that if one did not bring his festival peace offering on the first day of the festival of Sukkos, he may bring it even on the 8th day of assembly, despite the fact that it is a separate festival. And the Gemara asks, from where are these matters derived? And Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Yishmael that this halakha, this law, is derived by means of a verbal analogy. It is stated assembly, Deuteronomy 16:8, with regard to the 7th day of Passover, and it is stated assembly, Leviticus 23:36, with regard to the 8th day of the festival of Sukkos. So just as there, right, the last day of Passover is also a festival day, a full-fledged festival day. And as it is assembly with respect to the 7th day of Passover and the 8th day of Sukkos. Now, just as there, with regard to Passover, the day of assembly, i.e. the 7th day of Passover, is available for redress, right? To fix the error that you have a Chagigah and you didn't bring it on the first day of Passover. You can bring it up through the 7th day, and the 7th day is called the day of assembly. So it must be that the 8th day of Sukkos, which is also called the 8th day of assembly, must be available to redress the failure to bring the Chagigah on the first day of Sukkos. And the Gemara adds that the term assembly in each of these contexts is free for this verbal analogy, i.e., it is superfluous in both contexts, and therefore it is free for the rabbis to come and make a connection between those two verses. If the word assembly is needed for a different teaching in either of the two contexts, then it is not free to make that linkage, right? It's important to note that in terms of like finding these verbal analogies that are going to link two different laws because there's a word that's in common to them and it is superfluous in both contexts, and therefore we can learn an additional law from that connection, that's not something we do, right? That's not available to us. That was available to the sages. And even then, for the sages, it was kind of late in Jewish history to be finding these verbal analogies. Most of them had already been found in the time of Moses or through the time of the judges and the earlier sages. It's not that just because we find a word in two contexts that we can create a law. The sages created the laws. And, most of halacha was already fixed by the end of the Mishnaic period, certainly by the end of the Talmudic period. Some things changed over time, but really very, very few and with very, very good reason. And that's why when we're looking up the law, right, we go to the Shulchan Aruch where it was all codified, and that was done in the 1500s. Okay. Where am I? So it is available for redress. Now, the Gemara adds that the term assembly in each of these contexts is free for the verbal analogy, that it is superfluous in both contexts. As, if it is not free, then the verbal analogy can be refuted, because each context in which the term appears contains features that do not apply to the other one. Right? The 7th day of Passover is not the same in all respects as the 8th day of Sukkos. They're quite dissimilar. And so this word would have to be superfluous in both contexts for us to be able to make some kind of a connection between them. So what can one say about the 7th day of Passover? That it is not distinct from the days preceding it with regard to the festival offerings and the prohibition against eating leavened bread. Right? It has the same laws as the other days of Passover. The 7th day of Passover, you still can't eat chametz. You have to eat matzah if you're going to eat bread at all. And you can bring offerings like the other days of the festival, the other Passover offerings. Can you say the same with regard to the 8th day of the festival of Sukkos, which is distinct from the days preceding it, i.e., that the 8th day of assembly does not involve the same mitzvahs as the festival of Sukkos? It does not, right? There are mitzvahs that apply on Sukkos that don't apply in Shmini Atzeres. However, this is not so, as the term assembly is certainly free. Now, what is the meaning of assembly, atzeres? It means that one is stopped, atzur, i.e. prohibited from performing labor. But isn't it already written, you shall not perform labor, Deuteronomy 16:8. Why then do I need the term atzeres that the merciful one writes? Rather, learn from here that it is free to make this verbal analogy, this connection between a word found in one verse and in another, the same word. And the Gemara comments, and a Tana cites proof from here, as it is taught in a Baraisa with regard to a verse that deals with the festival of Sukkos, Leviticus 23:41, and you shall keep it a feast to the Lord 7 days. Now, one might have thought that one may continue to celebrate by bringing the festival peace offering all 7 days of the festival. Maybe every day of the festival you should be bringing a Chagigah. And recall that we're distinguishing this idea that the Chagigah is obligated to be brought on the first day of the festival. If you didn't bring it on the first day of the festival, you can bring it on the other days of the festival. But it's not that each day of the festival you would bring its own Chagigah. No. On the other days of the festival, the intermediate days, you can bring the festival offerings of rejoicing, right? Those are the simchas, the festival offerings of rejoicing. The Chagigah is only obligated on the first day, and if you didn't bring it on the first day, you can redress that failure on the other days, but you're not obligated to bring a Chagigah on the other days of the festival. Now, one might have thought that one may continue to celebrate by bringing the Chagigah all 7 days of the festival. Therefore, the verse states, it, which teaches it, i.e. the first day of the festival you shall celebrate with these offerings, and you may not celebrate all 7 days. If so, then why is 7 stated? For redress, i.e. if one failed to bring an offering on the first day, he may do so on all of the 7 days just to make up for that omission. And from where is it derived that if one did not celebrate by bringing the festival peace offering on the first day of the festival of Sukkos, that he may continue to celebrate throughout the pilgrimage festival and even on the last festival of Sukkos, which is its own holiday, Shmini Atzeres, the 8th day of assembly. And the verse states, you shall keep it in the 7th month, which indicates that one may bring the festival offerings even after the 7 days of the festival. Now they're distinguishing Sukkos versus Passover. So if the verse said only in the 7th month, one might have thought that one may continue to celebrate by bringing the offering at any time during the rest of the entire month. Therefore, the verse states it, indicating that you celebrate it, i.e. any of the festival days, but you may not celebrate outside of these days. And the Gemara asks, what is the meaning of the concept of redress mentioned in the Baraisa? So the Gemara answers that Rabbi Yochanan said, the other days of the festival are redress for the first day. If one did not bring the festival offering on the first day, he may still do so on the remaining days of the festival. And Rabbi Oshaya said, the days are redress for one another. Each day can be considered the main day of obligation, i.e. if one did not bring the offering on the first available day, he may do so on the remaining days. Right? So he's saying, and it sounds like it's the same, but it's not. Because according to Rabbi Yochanan, if you miss bringing it on the first day, but you were obligated to bring it on the first day, then you can bring it on the other days of the festival to make up for your omission. But if you weren't obligated on the first day, then you don't bring an offering at all during that whole festival because you weren't obligated on the first day. And so the other days are only redress for one who was obligated on the first day. You weren't, so you don't bring this offering. Rabbi Oshai is saying all of the days are appropriate. So if you weren't obligated on the first day because you were lame, because you were blind, because you were tameh, but then you became purified, or you regained your vision, or you regained your ability to walk, in the middle of the festival, according to Rabbi Oshaya, then you could bring your Chagigah on the first day that you were able to bring it, that you were qualified to bring it. And the Gemara asks, what is the practical difference between these two explanations? And Rabbi Zeir said the practical difference between them is in a case of one who was lame on the first day of the festival, and he was healed on the second day. Rabbi Yochanan said that the other days are redress for the first day. Since he was not fit, i.e. he was not qualified to bring his offerings on the first day, he's not fit to do so even on the second, as the second day only redresses for the first. The second day is not for those who are completely exempt on the first day, but for those who were obligated to sacrifice but neglected to do so. And Rabbi Oshaya said that the days are redressed for one another. Consequently, even though he was not fit to bring the offering on the first day, he is fit to do so on the second. And since a separate obligation applies on each day, even if one was unfit to bring the offering on the first day, he must do so when he becomes fit. That's according to Rabbi Oshaya. And the law follows Rabbi Yochanan, which is a little bit surprising because Rabbi Yochanan was a student of Rabbi Oshaya. So usually in a dispute between a teacher and his student, we follow the teacher. But in this case, we follow Rabbi Yochanan, one who was exempt from bringing the offering on the first day. Even if the reason for the exemption goes away, he remains exempt for the rest of the festival. The Gemara asks, and did Rabbi Yochanan actually say this? Rabbi Yochanan was involved in a dispute with regard to a nazir, right? So now we're going to learn a related concept from another incident in which Rabbi Yochanan was involved in a debate about the status of the nazir. So the nazir is one who takes a voluntary vow, right? No one is obligated to become a nazir. But the Torah specifies that one who wishes to sort of push himself up to a higher level of faith and observance, can undertake a vow of Naziris. So he's going to vow not to benefit from any kind of grapevine product. The main thing is he's not going to drink wine, but he's not even going to have grape juice. He's not going to eat grapes. He's not going to benefit in any way from the grapevine. He's not going to cut his hair. The most famous Nazir is Samson. And at the end of the period of his vow, because it's always for a specified period, and if he doesn't say how long the vow is for, then it is for 30 days. We define that elsewhere. Then he brings a bunch of offerings, he cuts his hair, and then he's back to being a regular Jew. Okay, so with regard to the Nazir, a Nazir who becomes, Rabbi Yochanan was involved in this debate. So a Nazir who becomes ritually impure, as a result, so another thing for the Nazir is while the days of his Naziris are upon him, he cannot come into contact with the dead. He's sort of like a Kohen there. A Kohen is not to enter a cemetery. He can only do so if his mother or father dies, right? And the Nazir, same thing. Or if he finds an unattended corpse. For that, even the Nazir is going to bury the corpse and allow himself to become impure. But otherwise, he has to stay away from every source of impurity, especially corpse impurity. So a Nazir becomes ritually impure as a result of contact with a corpse, must undergo a 7-day process of ritual purification, like anybody who comes into contact with a corpse when the temple is standing, after which he must bring a set of offerings, and then he restarts counting the days of his Naziris. While he's Tameh, it's like his Naziris is suspended. He goes through that 7-day purification that's required of any Jew who comes into contact with a corpse when the temple is standing, and we have the waters of purification, which we no longer have. But when those things are available, right, so one who comes into contact with a corpse, and he did a wonderful thing by burying the corpse, if that's what he was doing, he has to get sprinkled with the water of purification, with the ashes of the red heifer in it on the 3rd and 7th days of his purification. Then he immerses, I think he brings offerings, and then he's pure again. So that happens to a Nazir in the middle of his Naziris. He does that 7-day purification, and then he goes back to being a Nazir, and the days during those 7 days when he was impure don't count toward fulfilling his vow of Naziris, okay? Now, usually a Nazir brings one set of offerings, even for many occurrences of ritual impurity, right? So even he touches a sheretz, a creeping thing, or he comes into contact with a nida, a woman who is menstruating, and that would make him ritually impure. So he can bring one set of offerings for every time he became impure while he was a Nazir. He doesn't have to bring a separate offering for each of those lapses in his ritual purity while he was a Nazir. However, if he came into contact with a corpse for a second time on the 8th day after he first became ritually impure, right? So you touch the corpse. Now he's got to count 7 days of ritual, of not touching any other corpse, and count the 7 days until he can become pure again. So what if he touched a corpse on the 8th day? Well, he already completed his 7 days, but he hasn't brought his offerings yet, which will conclude, which will complete his days of purification after coming into contact with the corpse, is only complete when he brings those offerings that are necessary for that situation. And if on the 8th day he touches a corpse again before he brought those offerings, can he use the offerings of the first time to also cover the fact that he touched a corpse again on the 8th day? That's the question that's being asked. However, if he came into contact with a corpse for a second time on the 8th day, after he first became ritually impure, he must bring 2 sets of offerings, as the second impurity occurred at a time when he could have begun counting the days of his Naziris again. And the Amoraim dispute the details of this law. Now we're getting into this dispute. So the Gemara continues. Didn't Chagigah say that if a Nazir became ritually impure on the 8th day itself, he brings a second set of offerings? However, if he became ritually impure on the previous night, he does not bring an additional set of offerings because he could not have brought the offering at night. Offerings can only be brought during the day, during daytime. When the temple is standing, we only bring offerings for the altar during the daytime. So although 7 complete days have passed for this Nazir since he started counting after touching the corpse, as he did not yet have the opportunity to bring the offering that would complete his purification, it is as though his 7 days were not yet complete. Consequently, he may still bring 1 set of offerings for both instances of ritual impurity. And Rabbi Yochanan said, even if the Nazir became ritually impure on the night on which the 8th day begins, he also brings a second set of offerings. Why? Rabbi Yochanan maintains that this Nazir is effectively ready to begin counting the days of his vow again, as only the technicality that one may not bring offerings at night prevents him from doing so. Now we're going to understand why we're talking about this. This shows that according to the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, even when one is incapable of sacrificing his offerings, his obligation remains intact. And so too, in the case of one who was lame on the first day of the festival, his obligation to bring the festival offering applies in theory even on the first day, which means that he should be able to bring the offerings at a later date during the festival. And this understanding of how Rabbi Yochanan holds about whether we remain obligated or not if some other condition exists to exempt us would seem to contradict his position about that one who is lame on the first day of the festival does not redress that because he was exempt and he remains exempt for the rest of the festival. So Rabbi Yirmiyah said, the case of one who cannot bring an offering due to ritual impurity, this is different. He is not completely disqualified, as there is redress for ritual purity. This can be demonstrated from the law of the second Pesach, Pesach Sheni, right? So Pesach Sheni, the Torah spells out that if people are ritually impure at the time of Passover, when Passover begins, so they can't go to the Seder, they can't join in the Paschal Lamb, and maybe it was because they were really good people who buried an unattended corpse, did the ultimate mitzvah, right? The mitzvah shel emes, because the corpse cannot return the favor that you attended to its needs and buried it properly. So, but now they became ritually impure and they cannot partake of the Passover lamb on Passover night. And that happened even in the wilderness. And the people who were disqualified like that went to Moses and said, hey, we want to participate in Passover. We were taking care of the needs of a dead body. And now why are we disqualified from Passover? Moses took the question to God. God said those people spoke well. A month from now, you're going to have a second Passover, Passover Sheni, Pesach Sheni. What is it for? Just for the people who were tamei during first Passover, that they should be able to partake of the Paschal Lamb on Passover, a special Passover for them, second Passover. So just as one who is ritually impure and may not sacrifice the Pesach offering has the opportunity to redress the situation by means of the second Passover, so too, anyone who cannot bring an offering due to impurity may redress this at a later date. So they're distinguishing between somebody who can't bring an offering on the first day of a festival because they're tameh versus one who is exempt from bringing it because he is lame. We said only able-bodied people are obligated. This person who is lame is permitted to bring an offering. He's not excluded. He's just not obligated, right? Okay. Rav Papa strongly objects to this reasoning. This works out well according to the one who said that the second Pesach, Pesach Sheni, is redress for the first Paschal offering. According to this opinion, it is clear that the ritual impurity does not nullify his obligation to participate in the Paschal lamb, right? He remains obligated, and he's going to fulfill that obligation a month later by Pesach Sheni. However, according to the one who said that the second Pesach is a separate pilgrimage festival established for those who were unable to sacrifice the Paschal offering at the proper time, what is there to say? It's not an opportunity to redress. It's just a separate festival for people who happen to have been tameh or too far away from Jerusalem to bring the Paschal offering the first time. But it's not a redress for the first. It is its own holiday. It's a real nuance there. But according to that opinion, how are we going to learn out from Pesach Sheni whether the other days of Passover and Sukkos are redressed for bringing the Chagigah on the first day or not? So rather, Rav Papa said, now we're on the B side of 9. Rav Papa said, Rabbi Yochanan holds that night is not considered part of a date whose time has not yet arrived. Although one may not sacrifice offerings at night, the date itself has arrived. Right? At night, you begin a new date. Right? Jewish days on the calendar, on the Hebrew calendar, begin at night. At nightfall, it's the next day on the calendar. Right? At nightfall, Passover begins, and on the at the end of 7 days, at nightfall, Passover ends, and we're back into the regular days of the week. Consequently, and you can't bring offerings at night, only during the day. So it's really like the second half of a day of the date is when offerings can be brought once it becomes daytime. Consequently, Rabbi Yochanan's opinion with regard to a lame person does not contradict his ruling concerning a Nazir, because there's a difference whether you can bring it at night or not. And the Gemara asks, and did Rabbi Yochanan actually say this, that night is not considered part of a date whose time has not yet arrived? But didn't Rabbi Yochanan say, Azav? See, we're going to all these other areas of law to try and understand the obligations of one who didn't bring the Chagigah on the first day of the festival. Now we're going to talk about Azav. So Azav is a man with gonorrhea, right? And he gets established as Azav after he has multiple discharges of a white pus-like substance from his penis, okay? And that's defined in the Torah. So Azav, and then if one is declared Azav, so he has to go through a very special purification process, a 7-day purification process like one who came into contact with a corpse. Didn't Rabbi Yochanan say, Azav, at the end of his 7-day purification process, who saw that he experienced 1 emission at night and then 2 in the day, brings additional offerings for a second impurity, right? He was clean for 7 days, and then right at the end of his 7-day purification process, he had new emissions, right? So does he have to start counting another 7 days or not? Right, so one who saw 1 emission at night and 2 in the day, does he bring additional offerings for the second impurity? Had he experienced the emissions before he became ritually pure, he would have been required to bring only 1 set of offerings because he hadn't become pure yet. That 7-day purification process, when hopefully you don't see any further discharges, you're counting the days until they finish and then you become pure. So if you had these further emissions while you were impure, you're not going to need a whole new 7-day count. But if those discharges come after you became pure again, then it's a whole new impurity and a whole new 7-day count is going to be required. However, once his purification is complete, he must bring a separate set. In this case, the first emission occurred before he was able to sacrifice the offerings for his initial period of impurity. Nevertheless, as the two subsequent sightings of an emission occurred during the day, and they alone would suffice to confer upon him the status of Azav, they combine with the one from the previous night, and he is required to bring new offerings and have a whole new 7-day count. However, if he saw two emissions at night and one in the day, he does not bring additional offerings, because those two emissions that happened at night, he could not yet sacrifice the offerings that were owed due to his current status. So he was neither technically nor literally pure when he had those new emissions. He was still not pure yet, therefore still impure from the original instance when he became Azav. And so seeing these additional emissions is not going to trigger a whole new 7-day count and new set of offerings. And if it enters your mind that Rabbi Yochanan holds that night is not considered a date whose time has not yet arrived, then even in the case where he saw two emissions at night and one in the day, he should have to bring another set of offerings. He already reached the date of sacrificing the previous offerings before these new emissions occurred. This indicates that Rabbi Yochanan holds that night is considered part of a date whose time has not yet arrived. Now, the Gemara answers, when Rabbi Yochanan said this statement, he spoke according to the one who says that night is considered part of a date whose time has not yet arrived. However, he himself maintains that even if Azav saw all three emissions at night, he must bring another offering. Even though he hadn't become pure yet, because he can't bring his offerings, because it's nighttime, he can't bring his offerings till the next day when these additional emissions occurred. Rabbi Yochanan is going to hold that it's a new instance of impurity. The Gemara asks, well, if he, Rabbi Yochanan, spoke only according to the one who says that opinion, it is obvious that no new offerings are required. So then what novel idea did Rabbi Yochanan intend to express? And the Gemara answers, well, nevertheless, it was necessary for him to teach the case of Azav, who saw two in the day and one at night. The Gemara explains, it was necessary for Rabbi Yochanan to say this, lest it enter your mind to say in the manner of the strong objection of Rav Shesha, the son of Rav Edi, who holds that there is no reason to distinguish between a Zav seeing one or two emissions at night. Therefore, Rabbi Yochanan teaches us that the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yosef, that the first sighting confers merely the status of ritual impurity of one who has a seminal emission, and he is not yet classified as a Zav. Consequently, there's a difference between one who experienced one emission at night and one who experienced two. We don't have to get so into the weeds on the definitions of Azav. We'll come back to that later in our journey. The idea here really is, that in trying to define what is the status of one who was unable to bring the Chagigah, and is it because, and specifically, if he was lame, right? So one of his feet don't work. So he's exempt from bringing any offerings. He's not obligated, but then he was healed, right? And he became whole the next day. And we saw that according to Rabbi Oshaya. So then he is obligated to bring the Chagigah on this next day. According to Rabbi Yochanan, since he was exempt on the first day, and the later days are redress for what was omitted on the first day, but he wasn't obligated on the first day. So this man remains exempt for the rest of the holiday. The Mishna taught that if the pilgrimage festival passed and one did not celebrate it by sacrificing a festival peace offering, he is not obligated to pay restitution for it. And about this it is stated, that which is crooked cannot be made straight, and that which is wanting cannot be numbered. The sage Bar Hehe said to Hillel that if this is the correct interpretation of the verse, this term, be numbered, lehimanot, is apparently inappropriate. It should have said, be filled. It should have said, that which is crooked cannot be made straight, and that which is wanting, like that which is missing, cannot be filled. Why does it say that which is missing cannot be numbered, cannot be counted? It doesn't quite make sense. So according to Bar Hehe. So rather, this verse is referring to one whose friends reached a consensus with regard to a matter of a mitzvah, and he was not part of their consensus, and therefore he missed his opportunity to join them in the performance of the mitzvah, right? It's like a bunch of friends said, hey, did you hear there's a bris on the other side of town, or there's a wedding on the other side of town, or there's a shiva on the other side of town. Let's all walk over there and attend. And so this guy kind of doesn't join the group. They leave. They go fulfill that mitzvah. And he missed his chance. Now it's too late. He didn't join in. The wedding passed. He missed his chance to attend that wedding. And this explanation is also taught in a Baraisa. The meaning of the verse, that which is crooked cannot be made straight, and that which is wanting cannot be numbered, is like this. That which is crooked cannot be made straight. This is referring to one who omitted the recitation of the morning Shema, or the recitation of the evening Shema, or who omitted the morning prayer or the evening prayer. And that which is wanting cannot be numbered. This phrase is referring to one whose friends reached a consensus to participate in a mitzvah, and he was not part of their consensus, so he missed out on joining them in that mitzvah. And the Gemara records another discussion between Bar Hehe and Hillel. By the way, that famous story about the prospective convert who went to Shammai and said, teach me the Torah on one foot, and Shammai just beat him with a ruler and said, go away. And he went to Hillel and said, teach me the Torah while standing on one foot. And Hillel said, well, that which is hateful to you, do not do it to your fellow. And the rest is commentary. Now go learn. And then he said, well, Hillel treated me with such kindness. It must be that learning Torah leads to become like a person like Hillel. I'm going to learn Torah. And this person became a convert, became a Jew, and became quite learned, and became a sage, and became Bar Hehe. This is that guy, Bar Hehe. At least according to some opinions, that person became Bar Hehe. Why is he called Bar Hehe? He's the son of a Hey and a Hey, right? The Hey, the letter Hey, the fifth letter of the Hebrew alphabet, was added to Abraham's name. Before that, he was Avram. And then when he became the first Jew, he became Avraham. And adding that H, right, which is a letter that's part of God's name, sort of made him officially a Jew. And the same happened to Sarah, right? She was first named Sarai, and then she became Sarah when a Hey was added to her name. So Bar Hehe is the son of the Hey and the Hey, the original converts, Abraham and Sarah. He's the son of them, right? He's the son of Abraham and Sarah. Where am I? Okay. So Bar Hehe said to Hillel, what is the meaning of that which is written? Then you shall again discern between the righteous and the wicked, between he who serves God and he who does not serve him. Malachi 3:18. Well, there are two redundancies here. The righteous, that seems to be the same as he who serves God. And the wicked, that seems to be the same as he who does not serve him, God. So Hillel said to him, well, the one who serves him and the one who does not serve him actually are both of these phrases are referring to completely righteous people. But the verse is hinting at a distinction between them, as one who reviews his studies 100 times is not comparable to one who reviews his studies 101 times. Bar Hehe said to Hillel, and due to one extra time that he did not review, the verse calls him a person who does not serve God? And Hillel said to him, yes. Go and learn from the market of donkey drivers. One can hire a driver to travel up to 10 parasangs for 1 dinar, great distance. However, he will travel 11 parasangs only for 2 dinars. This shows that any departure beyond the norm is considered a significant difference. So maybe it was the norm to review one's studies 100 times. Back then, sages becoming sages. Now we see why how they memorized all of the Torah and all of the Mishna and all of the Bible and all of the Mishna and all of the Gemara. Because everything they learned, they reviewed it 100 times. But somebody who reviews it 101 times, he's in a class by himself, right? And I think Hillel was using hyperbole to say that you might think that, well, you've already reviewed it 100 times, so what difference will it make if you reviewed it 101? And he's saying it's going to make a huge difference, and therefore stretch yourself in matters of Torah study. Anytime you have an opportunity to go a little further, do it, because there's tremendous merit for that. The Gemara relates that Elijah the prophet said to Bar-Hehe, wow, so Elijah never died, and from time to time he would appear to our sages in the pages of the Talmud, like make an appearance in their lives, and they would know they were talking to Elijah. So the Gemara relates that Elijah the prophet said to Bar-Hehe, and some say that he said this to Rabbi Elazar. What is the meaning of that which is written? Behold, I have refined you, but not as silver. I have tried you in the furnace of affliction. Isaiah 48:10. What does this mean? I have tried you in the furnace of affliction. This teaches that the Holy One, blessed be He, sought after all good character traits to impart them to the Jewish people, and He found only poverty capable of preventing them from sin. Shmuel said, and some say it was Rav Yosef, this explains the folk saying that people say poverty is good for the Jewish people, like a red bridle, barza, for a white horse. Just as the red bridle accentuates the white color of the horse, so the challenge of poverty draws out the purity of the Jewish people, right? When they become too comfortable, they forget about God, they forget to pray to God, they forget to be observant, they think, oh, by the strength of my own two hands, I became such an important person, and they stop being an observant Jew and thanking God and blessing God and praying to God, right? That wealth and comfort can be bad for a Jew, and it can be bad for anybody, and we see why, right? So Elijah said to hey, yeah, God realized that, poor Jews are much more attached to God than wealthy Jews. The Mishnah taught that, obviously not always the case, maybe not even generally, but it can happen. Okay, the Mishnah taught that Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh says, who is the crooked that cannot be made straight? Now we keep coming back to this verse that appeared in our Mishnah number 4. One idea was the mamzer, right? Because a man who impregnates a married woman who's not his wife has created a mamzer. That problem can never be fixed. One who misses the morning prayer and at the time of the morning prayer. It's not the biggest sin in the world, but you missed it. You're not going to be able to make it up. Now we learned in Brachas that if you miss in a morning Amida, there is a makeup Amida that you could say in the afternoon. You could do like a double Amida in the afternoon. But if you miss that makeup session in the afternoon, then you've missed it for good. Now here's another, now we're back to the mamzer. So Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh says, who is the crooked that cannot be made straight? This verse is referring to one who engaged in intercourse with a woman forbidden to him and fathered a mamzer with her. And the Gemara infers from the Mishnah, if he fathers a child, yes, this verse applies, as he cannot remedy the situation. But if he does not father a child, no, the verse does not apply, as he can make amends, right? It's prohibited to commit adultery. If you do commit adultery, okay, well, you can make amends, you can make teshuva, you can apologize, you can bring an offering, you can make amends in various ways. But if they father a child through that can never, be fixed. And the Gemara asks, isn't it taught in a baraisa that Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh says, if a person steals, it is possible that he might return the stolen property and it might be made straight. If a person robs from another, it is possible that he might return his robbed property and it could be made straight. However, one who has sexual relations with a married woman with her consent and thereby renders her forbidden to her husband is banished from the world and passes away. So it's not so that you can make amends, you can fix that, right? If a married woman has sex with a man that's not her husband and she wasn't raped, she did that with her own, she consented, she did that willingly, at that point she becomes prohibited to her husband under traditional Torah law. And Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, and I'm almost done, so if you have any questions or comments, get them in. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says, someone who wants to examine an animal for blemishes to bring it as an offering does not say, inspect the camel or inspect the pig, as these are inherently disqualified for the altar. Rather, he says, inspect the lamb. Similarly, the term crooked applies only to one who was previously straight. And who is this? This is a Torah study who leaves his Torah study. This is a Torah scholar who leaves his Torah study. Right? So for Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, he doesn't get into this whole discussion of the mamzer. He says that which is crooked that cannot be made straight was one who was immersed in studying Torah and then just walked away from the whole thing and gave up on his Torah studies. That's very tragic because this person, had accomplished so much through his Torah study and then he abandoned it. But he can always come back, right? Once he comes back, he's no longer crooked. I would think even Shimon ben Yochai would acknowledge that. However, what he might say is, yeah, but all those years or months or weeks or days or hours that he didn't spend studying Torah, though that precious time is lost. Even though he can come back to studying and he could become a very accomplished Torah study and a very righteous individual, but the time that he wasted, he can never get that back. Okay. Questions or comments? Okay, Lucy. Why the different status of converts regarding the mamzer and marrying one? That's a good question. I don't think there was a note about that, and I didn't have a chance to do research on the question before I taught the class today. It doesn't explain that, right? So probably we'll encounter this teaching again, but I guess what it is, it might be that the Torah defines that one who is a mamzer can't marry one who was born into the congregation, and that's why the convert might apply. It's not that the convert was it's a teaching we have over and over and over and over again. A Jewish convert is a Jew in every way and is no less a Jew in any way than one who was born a Jew. But perhaps on the law of the mamzer, as it is spelled out in the Torah, it says he cannot marry one who was born into the congregation. And that actually, it's like sort of God having Rahmanis, having mercy on the mamzer. It's not his fault or her fault that they were born a mamzer because the mother, had that illegitimate affair with a man not her husband. But now, at least because there are converts in the world, there's hope for the mamzer, right? He can get reestablished. He can marry this convert, have children, and their children can be normal. Or he can marry a mamzer. Like, we don't want it to be that this person, through no fault of their own, is just permanently banished from sort of living a Jewish life. And they're not, because of that opening, as it were. Gordo. If a convert is subsequently considered to become a full Jew, like one born a Jew, why is the one-time convert allowed to marry mamzer and a born Jew is not? Okay, so it's the same question, and hopefully I answered it there. Sharon asks, how many generations until the mamzer line aren't mamzers anymore? I don't know. I don't know how that works, right? It's with this number of generations thing. I think it's actually like about the Moabites, right? Like, you shall not marry a Moabite, even up to the 10th generation. And I think there we learn it's like the 10th generation. There was a problem. Although then we saw that Ruth was a Moabite, right? So I'm not sure about the lineage of the mamzer. Like I said, like getting into the specifics of mamzer law is really not for today. And Sharon said, which party is unable to be made straight, the man or the mamzer? The man, right? That's the way it was defined. The man who has sex with that married woman and they have a mamzer together, it's the man he is something that became crooked that cannot be made straight because his action is permanent, has permanent consequences. Now, the mamzer is also going to suffer. I mean, that's the bottom line. Just as we see, even outside of the Jewish tradition, I know Nina's a big fan of Anthony Trollope. I'm a big fan of Patrick O'Brien. And when you read Jane Austen, when you read novels set like in England in the 1800s, there were a lot of these aristocrats who fathered natural children, right, outside of wedlock. And, those children really suffered. Not their fault, but these sort of natural children were punished by society by having this status that, that they couldn't overcome through no fault of their own. Okay, that's what I've got for us today. Nina's reminding me I've been on for over an hour. My friends, a reminder, no class tomorrow night, Saturday night. Nina and I are going to the opening of her mom's art exhibit here in LA. So we'll see you, God willing, Sunday night, the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific, for page 10. And maybe we'll do the double daf so we can get back on schedule. All the best. Good Shabbos.